Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network, presented by FanDuel. Great to have them aboard and joining me to look at the behemoths and the NBA and the Western Conference, the champion Thunder, are Dylan Huntzinger and Matt Tierney, who hosts Topic Thunder, the podcast on our Bleav Network. So part of the gang here at Bleav. Great to have you guys with us. And just to start off with, how long have each of you covered the Thunder, and do you live in OKC or have roots there? I'll let Dylan start off first.
So I started covering the Thunder, I guess, back in 2017. I have my own solo podcast. That's where Thunder Chats came from. That's what the podcast was called. And I actually had like all of our founding members on the pod as guests. And we was just like, hey, let's do a podcast together. And eventually Tierney was actually, I call him Tierney. We have two Matts on the show. So I call him Tierney and I call the other one Moles. But Tierney was in the second wave along with another guy, Jerry. You know, we all kind of got together and, just podcasting, talking Thunder. In terms of me, like, now I live in Kentucky, born and raised in Kentucky, been here the whole time. Obviously there's no NBA team in Kentucky. I kind of got into the NBA watching Allen Iverson, but I didn't have an attachment to the Sixers, Nuggets, Pistons, Grizzlies, any of those teams. So whenever he was retired, I was like in the NBA, but I didn't have a fandom at that point. And that was around the time the Thunder pushed the Lakers to 6 games whenever they were the 8 seed against the 1 seed. And I think that was like our first playoff series. Obviously the crowd was going nuts. You had Rush, KD, James Harden, like, you had that like young triumvirate to like rally around. Like I said, man, like I'm a Kentucky fan. So like I love a home crowd atmosphere, and the crowd standing up, like standing ovation, chanting OKC, even as you're eliminated on your home court. Like I was hook, line, and sinker, and I've been diehard ever since.
Yeah, a little bit more traditional for me in terms of fandom. I just lived here. I technically wasn't born here, but we moved in when I was like 5. It's basically been home for me my whole life. And outside of, a couple years in grad school where I moved back during the pandemic and have been in Oklahoma City ever since. How I came into this pod too, just as like kind of a quick funny story. I also tried to do a pod. It wasn't called, my name, Matt Tierney. It was called something very odd. It was called Pardon My Kiwis, which was in a tribute to Steven Adams being from Kiwi and also a blatant ripoff of a popular sports podcast right now. It lasted exactly 1 episode because then I ended up linking up with Thunder Chat. So
it was a great recruiting tape.
It was a great recruiting tape. And it's a very cool thing that we've created here in Oklahoma City. And you can see that from fans, every playoff where the players are coming back from the OKC airport, we have like hundreds of people that stand outside and just to cheer them for like, 10 seconds that they walk by, but they'll stand there for hours. We had the OKC parade, which I was able to go to, which was really awesome. And it was just packed to the gills in downtown. So the community as a whole has been very cool to see, but fortunate enough to be here in person to witness all that.
Since there are a lot of younger Rockets fans who'd like to duplicate what just happened in OKC, and, since you guys are OKC fans that go back a ways, what was it like to see the Thunder go through this perfect rebuild and near Cinderella season culminating in the championship parade?
I mean, it was awesome to see Sam Presti kind of call his shot like very early on, like after we traded Chris Paul and like ushered in the like true rebuild. Like, everybody thought that it was the rebuild whenever we traded Paul George for Shea and a bunch of picks. And whenever we traded Russ, like we thought that was like, it was the beginning of a new era, but not yet the rebuild because, we went to the playoffs. And, of course, you guys had to knock us out in the bubble playoffs. So thank you for that. But, ushered in a newer era in which, Sam Presti addressed the Thunder fans, across the world in an op-ed when he basically just, like, laid out his plan for what he was going to do, like saying that this isn't something that is built in a day. This, we're not trying to just get in the playoffs like for a couple of years. Like and the term that he used and like Thunder fans kind of adopted and made it their mantra is when we get back to the postseason, we want it to be an arrival, not an appearance. That was kind of our word cry for a couple of years. People kind of like overblew how long the tank actually lasted because I think that we were around 500 that first season without Chris Paul before Shea got hurt, and Shea I think missed like 35, 40 games or something like that. And that's like when the wheels really came off at that point. And then the next season, of course, that was like the true, like if you could point to one true year that we tanked, it was that season. And of course, that's the season that
sounds like he's breaking up. Matt, you want to jump in while
he's no.
Oh, he's back now. Yeah, I was just gonna add on to the Sam Presti praise because like the Paul George trade happened, and then the next big part of it was I think what Dylan was getting to was Russell Westbrook traded to the Rockets. We get Chris Paul. That sort of was a very important year, I think, for Shea as well, because of, Chris Paul is such a good mentor, and being able to be there for at least a year to mentor Shea when he was very young, very think he was probably like 20, 21 at that point, and have him develop into what we all know him as now. And then it's just all the little pieces that Sam Presti did along the way. He drafted Josh Giddey, who we thought, could be something, but then ends up turning him into Alex Caruso, who was just a vital part of the entire playoff series. We go on to free agency and get Isaiah Hartenstein, which granted, he didn't have as big of an impact in the later series with the Pacers or the Wolves, but during the Nuggets series, that was a very pivotal part of our roster, just keeping Jokic contained. Those little pieces that we did alongside just casually drafting Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, two of the better players in the NBA in a couple of years, I believe, in the same NBA draft, was just all part of the masterpiece that Sam Presti has done. And it takes a very calculated GM who isn't just going to try to put all of his chips in one particular player or one particular year. There's always a 5 to 10 year plan ahead. Even if you are trying to win a championship this year, there's always a backup and a backup to the backup. And I think you're seeing that with what we now have, because we have reached the summit as Thunder fans, but we still have a lot of assets in the tank that can be used. We also have the flexibility to move contracts around, because we all know the daunting CBA second apron that everyone's talking about. We have wiggle room around that, even when Chet, J-Dub, and Jay all get their massive contracts. So we're set up for the future. Even though we've already kind of reached where we want to, we still have a long-term plan. I think that's, a big part of what the goal of Sam Presti was to, like Dylan said, being a rival.
Yeah, you're welcome, first of all, for the Chris Paul trade. Rockets fans immediately hated that one. And of course, so many ties between these two teams. Like you brought up the Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. Of course, Russell Westbrook comes to Houston. James Harden comes to Houston. James Harden ends up being upset, leaves, but leads to the Rockets rebuild and some of the pieces that they have right now and where they are. And then we're going to get to the last guy in that trifecta, Kevin Durant. What are your feelings about the Rockets dealing for Durant? Not only is a OKC legend, but a huge piece in challenging the Thunder next year, potentially.
I thought it was a great move for you guys. I hope it don't go again, but very fun, young team, thrive on defense. Obviously, you got a little bit of versatility and with Thom and Thompson and Alper Sengun and Fred VanVleet. Jalen Green was always the big question mark. And it felt like if he was able to step in, you might not have needed to make this move. Just because it felt like, especially late in games, it felt like you guys really needed that go-to guy to go get you a bucket.
Yeah, it looks like, Matt, you're going to just have to take over. I'm not sure what's going on with him.
It's funny. Every time he's fine, and then as soon as he talks, it cuts out. I don't know what's happening. But I personally am a big Jalen Green. I have stock in him, I'll say that. But I do think if Houston is doing what they're doing and they're cashing in now because they have this very good core group of players and a pretty deep roster, mind you, they pulled the trigger. And you assume, you're probably more in the know on this than I am, but you assume that they're also going to extend KD, because that's basically a 1-year rental at this point that you're giving up. So you assume he's going to be there for at least multiple years. He's proven to be an elite scorer even at his age. And like Dylan was saying, he is a guy who you can give the ball to in the late minutes of an NBA playoffs game, which in that Golden State Warriors series just felt like that was always the thing that they just couldn't figure out. Was they could stop Golden State to some extent and grind it to a 90 to 87 game. But then when the chips were on the table and it was last 2 minutes, who's going to score? And it didn't feel like they had that guy consistently. Fred VanVleet could do it here and there, but Kevin Durant is a legendary consistent. He will get you a bucket when you need it. He's proven it for over a decade now. And now you've got him with a very good defensive core still, despite giving up Dylan Brooks. I think it's still a very good defensive core with Dorian Finney-Smith bringing him in from free agency. They did a very good job, not only with just Kevin Durant, which, as a quick aside for Thunder fans, I don't know if this is the consensus for all OKC fans. Maybe some of them still have residual hatred for what happened back in 2016. But I think personally, now that we've won a title, it's very much water under the bridge. It doesn't really feel like it's a particularly hostile, situation between OKC and Kevin Durant. It is probably the first time he has been on a highly, highly competitive team since he did go to the Warriors, when it was as hostile as it was. But I just don't feel like even though he's going to be on a title contending team this year, if all things lay out as they should, I don't really see it as OKC fans are going to be booing him out every time he touches the ball or something like that in Paycom Center. So getting back to the Rockets, I think he's exactly what they needed. And with all the other free agency moves that they made, they're set to be right up there. I think they're projected as second best odds to win the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, we're about to get to that. Before we get there, I just want to ask you, Matt, is there anything you could tell Rockets fans about what to expect from KD that maybe isn't obvious unless you watch him every day as you did for years? It could be on the court, as a locker room guy, or whichever direction you want to go with that.
As a locker room guy, I think he's a little bit undervalued. And I think part of it is because of the way he left OKC. And I think part of it is because in the years after Golden State, every team he's been to hasn't really worked out. And so it can come across as, oh, KD is like ruining these franchises. And I think it's more the franchises were the problem than KD. I think KD is actually a pretty decent, more than decent locker room guy. I think he's someone who just cares about basketball. I don't think he really cares about like interpersonal drama. He just wants to hoop. And I think that's, if you're looking for someone who can be not only just the guy in the locker room, because that's what he's going to be in any locker room he steps into, he's also going to be someone who can not get intermingled with anything that's not that important. I think that's a bonus because I won't say any particular names, but there's high level NBA players out there that have a history of causing major drama. And Kevin Durant's never actually had that. He's never had like a situation where he's, lost faith with the GM or he demands a trade out of somewhere. I think he's just always been like, I want to win. And if I can win, I want that's the place I want to be. But it's nothing more than basketball. I think that's sort of a part of this that could go a little bit underrated. Thunder fans know just on the court, he's one of the most clutch players I've ever seen. Even at 37, the moment never phases him. Nothing is going to, cause him to get scared of the moment. And I think that also is on the court a big factor to his game.
Yeah, just to let our audio people know, Sam Presti has traded Dylan for more draft choices down the road. So right now we do not have Dylan. We're going to go ahead with
Sam Presti got more picks somehow.
Yeah, we're going with Matt for the moment. And you mentioned the big picture. If you look at the Western Conference Championship odds, Matt, and our friends at FanDuel have OKC as the big favorite. No surprise, plus 140. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to ask you about the next four teams. Rockets and Nuggets are next on the odds, tied at plus 500. After that, the Lakers and T-Wolves are tied at plus 1,000. Do you agree with that order? And who would you bet on if the Thunder stumble this year?
Yeah, we actually ranked the Western Conference on our part not too long ago. So I'm going to be consistent because I don't want to change it up. So I will say fair warning. It may not be what Houston Rockets fans want to hear, but obviously I think OKC, if they do not have any injuries, is going to stay atop. And part of that is because, look, they won 68 games, but you have to also put that into context of what happened throughout that season. They were not a perfectly healthy team throughout that 68-win season. They lost Chet Holmgren for almost, I think, half the season with a broken hip. Isaiah Hartenstein was not in for a large portion of that too. So they had no bigs for a pretty decent amount of time and were able to tread water along the way. Alex Caruso, an injury history, so he was on and off. So it wasn't a healthy team, and they still got 68 wins. So if they can not have Chet Holmgren snap his hip in two, I think they can easily repeat that. But if there were another team besides OKC, I currently lean the Nuggets, and this is the reason I gave before, so I'll be consistent with that as well. When I look at a team that's bringing in a superstar for the first time, there's always a question of, is it going to work? Because you've never actually seen him play with this collective group of people. And it harkens back to what's historically become like a problem with teams that they just bring in superstars. You saw like the Phoenix Suns did it with Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. It just didn't work. And it happened in Brooklyn as well with KD and James Harden. That collection of and Kyrie Irving, that collection of stars just didn't work for whatever reason. And you can argue maybe it's just the general manager didn't have the right pieces around him. There's a lot of different reasons, but I've grown weary of teams bringing in a superstar and just being like, oh, they're going to be really, really good now, because it's not always the case. So for that reason, I'm going with the Nuggets because they did upgrade their team, but it was more the guys on the outside. They swap in Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson. And I think that is a pretty decent upgrade in that particular area. They also get Bruce Brown back, who didn't have the greatest season, but with Jokic, I think could come back to what Bruce Brown was.
I would say the Nuggets because they basically, they took the OKC to a long series, and they did it with one-armed Gordon and one-armed Michael Porter Jr.
Exactly.
Basically both playing injured in that series. So what more could they get, if they had two healthy starters along with Jokic?
Exactly. And that's why I think with the odds with FanDuel being exactly the same for the Nuggets and Rockets, I'm a little bit like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the Nuggets are a much more proven team and can beat the Thunder if they are healthy. And they had a couple of other injuries kind of like on their deep bench too. So they were pretty tight in their roster in that series. And that was part of the reason why even Jokic was getting so tired at the end, is because we were such a deep team and they had like 7 or 8 guys that they could play. And Jokic was playing pretty much the entire time because of that. They also get back De'Aaron Holmes this season too, which will be a big bonus for them, especially for rotation minutes for Jokic. But yeah, for that reason, I think the Nuggets you have to put at a little bit higher than the Rockets. But Kevin Durant could come in here and just be the perfect piece for the Rockets, and I could be proven completely wrong. It's just a matter of time to see. But I think before we play a single game, you have to put the Nuggets above the Rockets. And I agree, Minnesota is at the 4. I think those 3 teams we've been talking about, Rockets, Nuggets, and Thunder, are a clear tier above everybody else. So I think I personally would be interchanging between like the Wolves and the Clippers and like that 4 slot there. But I mean, if the Wolves are the next in line, that seems fair to me. But it's those 3 at the top that I think are the real contenders for this Western Conference.
Yeah, I feel like I take off my red colored glasses and, I agree with you about the Nuggets for sure. And I want to hit on the Rockets Thunder as a matchup. But before I do, I just want to ask the listeners, what do you guys think about this matchup between the Rockets and the Thunder from a Rockets perspective or even a Thunder perspective? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Also, look for our YouTube shorts if you need a quick break at work. Don't forget the Texans play Saturday. I'm doing live post-game shows again this season, and we'll be live 9 p.m. on game days this year. So if you're hanging with friends or at the game, you can get in on the live chat that night. Join me and my co-host Tom this Saturday night. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with notifications so you can get updates on the live shows and all our content. You will also want to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. All right. The Thunder's offseason, Matt, was very simple. They give extensions to the big 3, SGA, Jalen, and Chet. Mm-hmm. Did Presti get any value in the extensions? Because we know that's massive with the current CBA.
One of the interesting things about J-Dub's extension in particular, typically with these extensions, it's in terms of percentage of the cap, it's usually 25% of the cap, but then it will jump up to 30% if they hit like all NBA or something to that nature. Usually it's all NBA. And what's interesting about J-Dub's extension is that it's not in a 25 immediately to 30% of the cap, which 5% of the cap is obviously like a big factor, especially when you're trying to fill out the rest of the roster. It now goes 25% of the cap, starting. And then if he makes 3rd All-NBA team, it's 26%. If he makes 2nd All-NBA team, it's 27%. And if he makes 1st All-NBA team, MVP, rookie, or defensive player of the year, one of those big awards, it's 30%. So I think it's structured in a way that's very useful to us, because if it's just any All-NBA team, he's probably going to get that, right? He just made their 3rd All-NBA team, and I think he's going to keep getting better in years 3, 4, and 5. But now you basically have the best of both worlds, because if he doesn't necessarily take a next step up, he's still a very good player, but if he doesn't take a next step up, your extension doesn't bump up to 30, it bumps up to like 26, 27%. And again, a few percentages can mean 1 veteran minimum that you could bring in. And now the alternative is, if he does make 1st All-NBA team and it does kick in, well, you've got now 2 of the best 5 players in the NBA on your roster, according to that particular stat. So it's the best of both worlds. I think that is one of those small things that gradually came out once the contract news was reported, but you kind of have to like look in the weeds, and it's on Spotrac now, so you can kind of see the language that they have, but that's a pretty useful part of it. The other 2 contracts are pretty standard. I think Chet's, it's just the normal 25%, and it doesn't have any kickers in it. So that was also kind of a big part of it. So it goes up to 27% in his last year. So it can't ever go up to that 30% with any incentives, but J-Dubs can, with those caveats that I just mentioned. And obviously Shea is going to get what he wants. He can have every penny in the world for all I care. But the Chet and J-Dub ones, obviously you need to make those. You had to get the max for them, but the little things on the ends of those save us a few $1 million potentially. That's important when you're trying to really build around this core 3, because as much as Thunder fans love this roster, it's not going to stay this way in a couple of years. We have to make some moves to move off like Isaiah Hartenstein, who's got a pretty big contract, maybe even Lou Dort, who has a reasonable contract or reasonably high contract as well. And those moves are going to be much more helpful if we have some wiggle room. with those percentages. So
yeah, no doubt about that. And, from the outside looking in, it's nearly impossible, Matt, to find an OKC weakness. Is there one?
If I had to say one thing, and this is one thing that also happened in the NBA playoffs the entire time, is the shooting. We have guys that are 3-point shooting experts. Isaiah Joe is there for that particular reason. Lou Dort can be that. He was this regular season. He shot 40% from three. But then when it comes down to the playoffs, a lot of that just sort of went away. And obviously teams are going to be playing a lot more intense defensively. So you kind of expect that. But like you said, we didn't do much in the offseason besides just extend these guys. We didn't bring any new players in. So we're pretty much relying on these same guys to hopefully improve in that department. We have a very good shooting coach here in the Thunder front office in Chip England. He was with San Antonio for a while, and he's proven to be very good with helping players get their shooting form down. And I trust him with that, but we've got to have guys that, besides the big three with Shea, Dub, and Chet, we have to have other guys be able to make their shots from the outside, especially if you want Shea to do what he does best with driving. Because if they're not, you kind of see what teams did in the playoffs against us, where they just completely clog the paint. And if they're not going to let Shea do anything at the mid-range or at the rim, it's much harder to unlock the rest of the offense. Granted, one thing I will say is J-Dub was playing the entire playoffs with a torn ligament in his wrist. He had surgery for it over the offseason. He kind of came out about it through some videos on YouTube about how he was going through that. He basically had to have, I think it was cortisone or steroid shots every single day. He had to rework his shooting form between the end of the regular season and the playoffs because it wasn't going to get any better with the ligament that he tore in his wrist. So I think that's a factor too. I think if J-Dub is completely healthy, he is one of those guys who could aid in improving the outside shooting. But the fact of the matter is the role players also have to be able to do that too if you want to have a good team. And we were able to pull through this playoffs without that. I mean, we went to 7 games in the last 2 series, so it was definitely a nail biter. But if you're someone outside of OKC looking in, that's a weakness that is certainly exploitable, because if you can prevent Shea from getting to his spot and basically letting the guys on the outside do whatever they want, that can really kind of gunk up and slow down the Thunder offense.
The Rockets and Thunder faced each other 5 times last year. The Thunder won 3 of 5. One of the Rockets' losses was when they sat nearly every rotation player. They split 2 early games. Then the closest facsimile to a playoff game was OKC's win in that in-season tourney. The Rockets win late in the season in OKC, and what I thought was one of their best performances of the season. Do you have any specific recollections, Matt, of the matchups this season?
I remember Şengün being such a big problem consistently. And I think part of that was because, I guess I could have also mentioned this too, but rebounding is one of those things. It's not necessarily a weakness. I guess it is, but we sort of elect to not be a great rebounding team. And the trade-off is basically we can just run and gun a lot faster, because if we get a steal or a turnover, we can just hit the ground running, and we kind of give up size and rebounding for that reason. And I think that was a big problem with the Rockets matchup, is that Şengün is so good at offensive rebounding, giving them second chances, that was just like always a frustrating part of that team in terms of as a Thunder fan. Now, I believe, I could be wrong, I think Isaiah Hartenstein was out for at least a couple of those games. I'd have to go back and look. But if he's in there to help with that particular department, it would be a little bit less frustrating as a Thunder fan. But that to me was one of those just kind of consistent throughout the season points of reference, where I was like, man, Şengün's got like 5 offensive rebounds again. How do we keep allowing this? And it's just because he's just so good in that department, and also being able to see the floor when he gets an offensive rebound and finding someone on the outside. The second chance points in particular were a big problem.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if there's a particular matchup. That one's the one it's obvious that you're worried about. You mentioned size. The Rockets can run 7 rotation players with 7-foot-plus wingspans right now. Can size bother the Thunder?
Yeah, the Rockets are kind of doing what the Thunder do, which is wingspan and size and clogging up passing lanes, because that was our bread and butter. Our offense came a lot of times from the defense. You would think, as a team that, at practice sees a lot of this length in the Thunder, they would be prepared for what the Rockets are coming with, because of the fact that they now are bringing in more length with Dorian Finney-Smith. They already have Amen Thompson, who's, I think, going to be a stud defensively. They have Jabari Smith as well. I mean, it goes on and on, but it's definitely not going to be easy. I think if you are the Thunder, and you're especially looking at the playoffs, where a lot of times when Shea wasn't getting his shot, the offense just sort of stalled out. The ball wasn't moving as much as it should. It was basically just dribble, shoot. I think that's where, if you're the Thunder, you've got to be a little bit more mature with how you kind of go into the game and start playing it. And as soon if you don't get the look that you want, not just completely shutting down, because the Rockets are going to do that. They're not going to give you the look that you want because it's going to be too difficult at times to get that pass that you're looking for. If you are the Thunder, then in that sense, you need to be able to not just shut down and be able to reset and sort of just think within the flow of the offense. I think one person in particular that comes to mind is Alex Caruso on the offensive end. Like defensively, we know he's very good, but offensively, I think what he does really well is if there's a play that doesn't quite work out, he will always find the open space. And a lot of times it's like a cutback to the rim or on the baseline. Sometimes he'll be the one with the ball and he'll find it, but usually it's off ball. He's one of those guys that I think can just revive the offense when the original plan or the set play doesn't work out as it's supposed to. So I'm kind of looking to him for, in those Rockets matchups with that, I would probably argue the second best defense besides OKC in the league. I think he's going to be one of those big factors, as well as Aaron Wiggins, who does a lot of that cutback off ball play as well. So that's sort of what I'm looking for as a Thunder fan. But yeah, Houston is, in terms of their size and length, is going to be a massive, massive problem for sure.
I don't know if you have any memories of this, but how does Amen Thompson compare to other defenders on SGA from what you saw this past season and what you've seen from SGA and other guys and how they seem to lock him up?
I'm trying to remember. I feel like there was a particular game. I might be mixing up the players, but I feel like there was a play where it was a last minute shot from Shea and Amen Thompson. He was kind of on Shea's hip. Like Shea got by him a little bit, but then he put up Shea put up like kind of a floater and Amen was able to like come back over the top and block it. And it was one of those plays that was just like, even when you beat your guy, Amen Thompson can still like recover enough to just completely deny you. And as a fan, that's just so frustrating because it's like Shea's first step is so good and sometimes it doesn't even matter. The other thing too is, we have some really good screeners on this team with particularly with Isaiah Hartenstein, who can free Shea up a little bit. And I think Amen is so good at getting around that so quickly just because how athletic he is. It's not always like just screen and switch because that's not going to work on this particular team, I think. And even if it does, they have so much length that there's not going to be one particular weakness in this Houston Rockets defense that we can exploit. But yeah, with Amen Thompson in particular, I think he's also one of those guys that is so fast off of a turnover. He kind of gives us a taste of our own medicine where we're very good at, as soon as like someone like Caruso or even like Casey Wallace is a lot, where they sort of poke the ball away, they're immediately gunning for the other rim. And I think Amen does that as well as in a one-man game where he can just poke the ball away and he's immediately going in the opposite direction faster than everybody else. And it's just free 2 points that can completely, shift the momentum in one way or the other. He's one of those guys that definitely scares me. I'm wondering too, and I mean, I'm kind of throwing this back at you. I've kind of been wondering about their guard rotation as a whole, besides just Amen and Fred VanVleet, because I've been looking at Reed Shepherd a lot. And I'm like, what are the Rockets going to do with him? Because I like him as an offensive player, but we're talking about the defensive impact and the length. And it's like, I wonder how they're going to be able to get around that with him because they are in kind of a win now mode, but he didn't really get a lot of time in the playoffs this year or towards the end of the season. So I'm kind of wondering what they're going to do with him in this particular situation. I don't know if they keep him and see what happens or try to get something for him as an asset, but I'm kind of wondering on that end what they're going to do. I think probably what's going to happen is they just play big, where they usually have like maybe either Amen or Fred VanVleet, and then they just go a bunch of wings and like Jabari or Steven Adams or Clint or Şengün at the 5.
OKC plays into what the storyline was with Reed because he struggled early in the year, then he was out of the rotation. He comes back and he gets that start when everybody else is sitting on the bench against Oklahoma City. Looks great. Mm-hmm. Best game of the year. Rockets lose, but he was playing with a bunch of nobodies for that game. And then he gets hurt for a few weeks. And when he comes back, just doesn't look all that good. And basically that was the end of it. They definitely weren't going to use him in the playoffs at that point.
Right.
My feeling is that they want him to get real reps behind Fred VanVleet. So he's going to get backup point guard duties this entire year unless he just looks terrible. And then the hope is that maybe by the playoffs, he's okay enough defensively where he's not a disaster. The thing with the Rockets is you've got so much length at the other positions. They hope that those guys can cover up some of his mistakes. Guys like you mentioned, Amen, Tari Eason, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's sort of the plan with Reed Sheppard, but you said it. I mean, the defense has scared me, and I've said that over and over again. I'm really worried that he's not going to be able to make it in the NBA because he's going to get picked on, like we saw with the Mike Conleys, and when he gets picked on at times, and different guys that are smaller point guards in the modern NBA. I mean, old school NBA, I would have said Reed Sheppard is gold, but nowadays you better be elite offensively if you're not getting it done defensively. And he's just got to work on some footwork as well. I mean, he gets blown by way too much, but he's got some ability to get some steals. One of the things, Matt, I was noticing that was FanDuel had the Thunder win total at 62.5. Interesting number. What do you think about that number? And do you go the over or the under if you're making a wager?
If you are someone who does sports betting a lot, I think you probably know this, but Vegas tends to, with the extremes of the wins and the losses, they usually will hedge towards the middle. So I think in this particular case, because the total, they couldn't put a total at like 65, 66.5, because that's just far too high. So they kind of hedged to 62. And for that reason, I think it's very easy to see an over for this. And the counter argument is obviously the Rockets got a lot better. The Nuggets got better. The West in general is just such a dominant conference as compared to the East that it's going to be hard for every game. But kind of what I was saying earlier, the Thunder got 68 wins on a team that was not healthy for half of the season. And you've got to expect that a freak injury like Chet's is not going to happen again, knock on wood, of course. But that to me tells me that if this all is quote unquote normal in terms of, regular, ankle strain here or there, a small hip injury that takes you out for like a week or two. If it's just those types of injuries, I could easily see us get over 62.5. And I would argue that we're in line to get very close, maybe not up to where we ended last season, but pretty close to that 68 win total again, just with the fact that we've brought the entire roster back. They're very young, so they're all still developing, especially, Case and Wallace. I think for what he did in year 2 to get to year 3, I think you could see a lot of really big things from him, not just defensively, but I think like offensively, he kind of found his spot a little bit. The big three is all just, I think, going to get better because Shea's in his prime, but Chet and J-Dub are going to get better because they're still so young. You just have a collection of youth and talent that I think is just getting better, not worse, even after a title run. So I'm clearly going over on 62.5.
Yeah, the only thing that I think might matter is SGA's health, and if he can stay as healthy as he did this past year, the importance of him is just so big to that lineup. Just Jokic or some of these key guys are these top 3, 4, 5 MVP candidates. One of the things that we talked about was, a lot of the connections that these two teams have. One thing we didn't know until we got him, and I don't think you know this until you get this guy on your team. Steven Adams has such an impact. Matt, it is unbelievable. And he is immediately everybody's favorite player. It's amazing what he's met to the Rockets. And at times at the end of last year, I felt like he might be the most important Rocket. The plus minus numbers were just off the chart, Matt.
Rockets fans probably knew this before he came to the team because they saw what he did to Patrick Beverley in that one play where he set a screen at half court and Patrick Beverley just like ran into him, fell over, and Steven Adams didn't move. He's a brick wall. He is a big, strong guy. That translates into a lot of rebound, a lot of offensive rebounding. He just gets second chance points for you guys. I loved Steven Adams when he was with the Thunder, just for that reason, just because he could move guys out of the way without a second thought. But also, he's off the court. He's just one of the coolest dudes ever. He's very chill. He cracks jokes all the time. He's just kind of like a happy-go-lucky guy. I love Steven Adams. I could sit here and talk about all the memories I've had with him, like off the court and all the fun things I remember, but we'd be here for an hour. But he's one of those guys that Thunder fans will never, ever forget. If we could, we would build a statue in Oklahoma City for him. We already have a mural for him, so there's that. But if we could build a statue too, we would.
He's incredible. And one last sort of esoteric question. Is there anything that you've learned about team building or title building from following the Thunder the last few years? Anything you can impart since these two organizations were forced into similar rebuilds?
I think a lot of the reason this team won a title, besides their talent, because I think we saw that the Pacers and the Nuggets, I think, had the talent to beat the Thunder. Obviously, with the Pacers, the Halliburton injury is a factor you have to put into it. But putting that aside, I think a big reason why the Thunder were able to eke it out in both of those was their team chemistry is one that I've never seen on another Thunder team or any other NBA team for that matter. You may have seen this. Thunder fans have seen this. I'm sure some other NBA fans have seen. What's become now very famous is their post-game interviews, initiated when Chet joined the team, because Chet is one of those guys, for whatever reason, he doesn't ever do a post-game interview by himself. He'll always bring somebody else. And that sort of snowballed into last year, what became just the team just all being around whoever is being interviewed. And they're kind of like elbow and joke with each other. And you could see it in those moments that you don't really get to see often, is them just kind of being themselves with each other. And then it kind of became like a huge cultural thing where our post-game interviewer, Nick Gallo, is the one that usually interviews him. And they would start to just do silly things. Like they would put a bunch of towels on his head. They would like dress him up with like a hat or something and like a chain. It was just like very goofy, very silly, not taking themselves too seriously. And I think that sort of energy is useful in doses in the NBA playoffs, especially in like game sevens, where you are so tight and so stressed out. If you have that kind of mentality of like, we can be loose with each other, we don't have to be stressed out all the time, that plays into the game of basketball in a little bit, I believe. And I think that was a big factor as to why this team was able to get over those edges. As far as on the court, I think what it really comes down to is like, and I think you alluded to this earlier, in the modern NBA, you cannot have any weaknesses on defense anymore. Every single weakness will be exploited through screens, and they'll find you somehow. They will always rotate around until they get the matchup they want. And the Thunder do not have that on their team. There is no defensive weaknesses you can exploit. Even their MVP Shea, who was putting up 30-point games every night, basically, is a positive defensive player. He's not a negative on that court or a neutral. He's a positive. And I think if you're looking at the Rockets too, for those 7 or 8 guys and a couple more down the line, there aren't any weaknesses either. I think that's a part of it that's going to be, if they can stay healthy, that's something that very few teams have in the NBA. And so I think that's one of those areas that you can definitely exploit, because other teams will have that defensive liability. Whether it's Kevin Durant, Fred VanVleet, whoever, if you get the switch you want and you go up on them one-on-one and you can take them and score more often than not, you're just going to win more games than the other team. So not having a weakness defensively is a big reason why I think a lot of people like the Rockets this year. But I think that was the recipe for the Thunder as well, is they will not let you do what you want on defense, and you will not get the shot you want if they play their defense correctly.
Yeah, and I'll throw out something else that the Rockets, I think, have picked up from the Thunder, besides chemistry, which, Daryl Morey wasn't much of a believer in it. Rafael Stone's more of a believer in chemistry. So they seem to be following that model from OKC, but the depth. And I feel like the depth with OKC has sort of changed maybe how some of these teams look at things going forward. I believe it's a sea changer with where we're seeing the NBA going as far as the new CBA, but also the injuries and all of that factoring in. And when you look at the Rockets, they're as deep as any team in the NBA. The only thing that I would say is you can be as deep as you want to, but if the wrong guys get hurt at the wrong time, you mentioned Halliburton or Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter last year for the Nuggets, it's very difficult to overcome those type of injuries. So, that's a key too. And that's always been a thing in the NBA. You are at Matt Tierney. Remind us where we can find you on social media, anywhere else, and just kind of plug what you're doing over there at Topic Thunder.
Follow us at OKC Topic Thunder. That's where I post everything. If you want more outlandish takes about the Thunder, you can follow me at Matt Tierney. But the more normal takes are at OKC Topic Thunder. And then we have a YouTube channel. You can't type in Topic Thunder because it will autocorrect to Tropic Thunder. So you have to type in OKC Topic Thunder and you will find it on YouTube. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, which was really cool. We've just started that YouTube channel this season. So we're hoping to build it out a little bit more in the upcoming seasons as well. And then on, like I said, on Twitter, OKC Topic Thunder as well.
It's the Bleav Network. Thank you again to FanDuel. Very sad that Steven Adams has blocked out, like he blocks everybody out, your friend Dylan. But it was great to have you on with us, Matt, and thanks for doing the show.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.